before the episode starts, I just want you guys to know that all footage in this episode of SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 is using the Definitive Edition, as that was the easiest thing for me to capture instead of having a copy of the retail edition to hand to just cap, random matches and stuff like that. So yes, everything you see is in the Definitive Edition and from the Definitive Edition. So anyway, let's get started. Following the release of SmackDown vs. Raw, the newly rebranded title failed to find its footing, feeling like a sidestep instead of a step forward. Many even felt the title was a step backward compared to Here Comes the Pain, in spite of positive reviews. The game had failed to capture the same staying power of its predecessor, leaving some fans of the franchise to go back to Here Comes the Pain, while others who owned a GameCube moved back to the recently released Day of Reckoning. And what of the casual gaming audience, that had always embraced a yearly SmackDown title as part of their gaming habit? Well, it was another solid year for the present console generation. Just some of the notable titles released that year were Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, Button Kaitos Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean, Metroid Prime 2, Burnout 3 Takedown, Ninja Gaiden, Halo 2, and yes, if you owned a PlayStation 2, you got the cream of the crop, with Dragon Quest VIII, Onimusha 3 Demon Siege, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, and of course, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which released a mere week apart from SmackDown vs. Raw, not to mention the sheer amount of high-quality titles on the portable market thanks to Nintendo's Game Boy Advance. With so many great quality titles to choose from, and only a limited amount of disposable income, it's easy to see why some didn't get the new SmackDown game that's good, but not as good as the one you already own. One thing that the franchise hadn't lost was anticipation. Print outlets, online publications, and message boards were smattered with ideas and feature sets to bring the series back on par with its former glory. Unlike previous years, SmackDown vs. Raw seemed to fade into the background, almost as if there hadn't been a new entry in the franchise since Here Comes the Pain. And with next generation hardware just around the corner, THQ and Ukes would have to regroup for what could be the PS2 swan song. Meanwhile, gamers on all sides were eagerly awaiting the release and reviews of the visually appealing WrestleMania 21, Studio Gante's first WWE outing on the Xbox. But by April of 2005, it had become clear that visuals were all the game had to offer, as the game was panned by critics and fans alike, citing slow and sluggish movement when it does work, and a progress-crippling series of bugs when it doesn't, with some even experiencing a hard crash during season mode, where others would experience their Xboxes just randomly switching off. Luckily for wrestling game fans, amid the poor reviews and critical and fan backlash against WrestleMania 21 during its week of release, THQ announced an event in LA, officially unveiling new titles. The video game world at large believed this would be where we would get our first official looks at both the Day of Reckoning sequel and the sequel to SmackDown vs. Raw. Well, they were half right, as Day of Reckoning 2 was not only officially announced, but also playable to attendees. Creative manager Matt Gregg confirmed that this would be the last WWE wrestling title on the system, saying that they were aiming to make the game something that would last players for multiple years. But what about the sequel to SmackDown vs. Raw? Well, when asked by multiple publications, THQ representatives simply said they had nothing to announce at this time. While disappointed, fans were instantly drawn to Day of Reckoning 2's incredible visuals, as they had now set the bar for SmackDown to beat. And they are fantastic. It's arguable that Day of Reckoning 2 is the best looking wrestling game of that generation. And while the flurry of Day of Reckoning 2 screenshots, movies, and articles was a nice distraction, many had their sights set on next month's Electronic Entertainment Expo, being the place where we would get our first look at the SmackDown vs. Raw sequel. E3 2005. The world finally got its first look at the PlayStation 3, went hands-on with the Xbox 360, and Nintendo were preparing us for a revolution. The video game industry and its consumers were looking toward the future, but just mere days before the event, THQ confirmed that the sequel to SmackDown vs. Raw would be skipping the event. I remember at the time being disappointed, but in hindsight, it was the right decision to miss it, as most current-gen games at the show were overshadowed by the buzz and attention of the next console generation. But this did beg the question, when will we get to see what THQ and Ukes had been up to? As unlike years prior, there wasn't a UK or European press event scheduled either. Outlets such as PSI2 magazine and PSW even reached out to THQ just to check, with both publications reporting in their reader mail sections to tell their readers to stay tuned. The remainder of May and all of June passed without a peep from THQ, until July 1st, 2005, when THQ announced they would be previewing the new SmackDown vs. Raw title later that week. Following the title's announcement, THQ put out a full press release, touting amazing realism thanks to the game's high-resolution textures and full motion-capped entrances, introducing a stamina system and gameplay focused on back-and-forth momentum, boasting that the game's season mode would be the best one ever, with improved cutscenes and 2 full seasons to play without story repetition, featuring over 100 different match types including fan-favorite Buried Alive, citing improved changes to the blood system now with 3 levels, as well as a fully customizable 3D locker room, and a host of new legends joining the game's roster. A few days later, an indoor press event in California was held, with THQ giving the press a chance to get their hands on the title, as well as a full product and interview with creative manager Corey Ledesma, in which he confirmed that the timer that used to be on Superstar entrances had now been removed, and the game featured full motion-captured entrances for each wrestler. This was the first of many long-time issues that fans of the series had complained about that had been remedied for this iteration of the game. Visual changes to the game were a real standout, utilizing things like motion blur and techniques that they'd learned over the years. Yuke's really took full advantage of the PlayStation 2 hardware to improve on the overall visual presentation of the game, giving it unmatched authenticity in mirroring WWE programming, even ensuring to have a more simplified HUD than the previous iteration. But aesthetics weren't the only thing to change. It really looked like Yuke's and THQ had taken the criticism of the previous title on board, with matches now taking a lot longer to complete, as players have to manage their stamina while keeping their momentum. The first big change is the game's momentum and stamina features, which work in tandem together. Throughout the course of the match, moves done, strikes thrown, taunts performed, and even running all deplete your stamina meter, which tires out your superstar, needing you to pause for a breather or keep going until your superstar inevitably collapses, forcing the player to grapple more methodically in order to maintain the balance of keeping his momentum while managing their stamina, which helps recreate the ebbs and flows of an actual match. The addition of the stamina system on top of the momentum system isn't what makes SmackDown vs. Raw 2006's wrestling so satisfying. It's all the wrinkles on top of it. For starters, while you're managing your momentum and stamina, limb damage now plays an even bigger factor. If the player's stamina is depleting, yet has managed to build successive limb damage on his opponent, as well as building up enough momentum to where he can execute the finisher, performing said finishing move right away would cause immense damage instead of saving the finisher, however at the risk of using considerable stamina, thus resulting in both wrestlers having to answer to the count of 10, which can result in a double countout. On the flip side, storing a finishing move instead of using it immediately causes significantly less damage, but can swing the momentum back in your favor if you're on the losing end of an assault. In addition, the new sleeper hold system, which is something I had wanted in a wrestling game since I first started playing them, is an absolute welcome addition and furthers the goal of recreating an actual match true to programming, as the player or the opponent can execute a sleeper hold from a standing or grounded position to slow down the pace of a match. The recipient then has 3 attempts to either break out of the hold, putting the aggressor in a sleeper hold of his own. Then there's the positives of storing a finisher. The first would be playing possum. If your opponent is beating you down and it looks like you've got no hope, simply hit the correct reversal button with the circle button to activate a possum pin. Clean and dirty finishing moves also make a refined return, this time having a stored finisher as well as a full momentum bar. A clean superstar can execute his opponent's finishing move by pressing the L1 and L2 buttons. Alternatively, a dirty superstar can execute a dastardly dirty move on his opponent, sometimes using brass knuckles or hitting the most painful move known to man, the low blow. And standard match gameplay isn't the only thing that has seen significant improvements. Take the steel cage match for example. You can now chase your opponent up the cage, preventing them from making an escape, as well as making a crawl to escape the cage door, while you or your opponent try to stop the escapee from leaving the cage. And while the build only had a very limited number of superstars, no Titantrons or entrance music, and was very much being called pre-alpha, the gameplay fundamentals were already here for a game worthy of Here Comes the Pain successor. Many of us, myself included, were pleased with the game's initial showing, as it seemed to be moving in the direction of a sports simulation game with the new match mechanics, the stat tracking, and the momentum system, all the while keeping SmackDown's core gameplay mechanics intact. On the 20th of July 2005 at the PlayStation meeting in Japan, WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 was announced for the PSP, promising exclusive features to that version as well as connectivity with the PlayStation 2 to unlock an exclusive WWE legend, which ends up being Jake the Snake Roberts. For a full look at the 2006 counterpart, look forward to Rebuilding SmackDown 2006, the PSP edition, sometime early next year. When those of us in the press got preview builds, unlike previous years, SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 already felt a level of polish that we just not seen this early. Are there differences between this and the retail release? Yes. But by all accounts, changes made here are completely understandable and extremely minor. Let's take a look. Okay, let's start with the only character model difference in the game. And yes, I was asked about this a lot when I confirmed I'd be doing Smackdown vs. Raw 2006. John Cena indeed does have the blue jeans instead of the black jeans in the early build of the game. This, however, is the only character difference out of the entire roster, as everyone else from the prototype to the final build are exactly the same. Minor differences include NPCs walking around with HUDs on screen during things like backstage brawls, however they are non-interactable just like in the final release. A few unfinished sound effect differences, as well as in the game's main menus, and while you wrestle a match, the game still plays the soundtrack of the previous game. The biggest difference between the prototype and the final release comes in the form of the create an entrance menu, as all preset entrances are still named. As you can see here, Matt Hardy, Devon, Maven, Jackie, which I assume is Miss Jackie, and Brock Lesnar. This continues into the stable menu, as the tag team and trio moves are also named, starting with Eugene_Regal, Basham Brothers, La Resistance, Regal_Tajuri, Hassan_Davari, Bushwhackers, Haas_Jackie, and General. And the biggest surprise to me, at least, is in the trio moves, as number 1 is named DX, number 2, New World Order, and number 3, Team Angle. Now, as far as I know, this has been widely contested, with no one ever really knowing what entrance this was up until now. Different sites reporting it was maybe a generic entrance, maybe a Evolution entrance, maybe a Team Angle entrance. Well, here it's named Team Angle, so I guess we have to go back and change all of those FAQs and preset entrance guides, and the names of these presets have been moved over into the definitive edition. A few weeks later, rumors started to spread across multiple forums, telling of a brand new franchise mode that was similar to the ones found in the 2K Sports titles, named GM mode. Now, upon reflection, I do believe this rumor was probably started by someone who either worked in THQ itself or someone by the press, because the information that was leaked out, including the name of the mode, was just too accurate and too coincidental because it all ended up being true. Normally, rumors like this don't necessarily end up true, or they are mangled into something different and it's half-truths but not really. But this was so accurate that by the time it was confirmed, looking back at it now, it was definitely a planned rumor that was started to build hype for the game. And it worked. Anyway, this would be a hot button topic for the next 1.5 months, with questions of, is it true, to does this mode even exist? This wasn't until a fan in Australia took a photo of the back of the preview box art, seemingly confirming GM mode. It was at that moment that THQ was ready to talk. On October 27, 2005, THQ confirmed the existence of GM mode in an exclusive interview with IGN. The game's franchise mode could be played between 1 or 2 players, with the ability to use the pre-existing WWE rosters or draft complete new ones. In the interview, THQ confirmed that internally this was being called GM mode Year 1, as the team at the time had plans to expand the mode over the course of multiple years, which was music to fans and critics' ears, as at this time franchise modes in sports video games were extremely popular, and it felt like the next evolutionary step for the Smackdown series. This also silenced a lot of criticism that the team had received for the change in direction that season mode had taken in the last 2 years. As while now season mode could be fully voiced in a more linear path story mode, GM mode would now serve as a replacement for the classic Smackdown 2 style season mode, filled with stat tracking, managing your finances, managing injuries and keeping your roster happy, all the while trying to win the ratings. With GM mode confirmed, Smackdown vs. Raw 2006 was looking to be a must-have title, answering all the criticism of the previous title, while still looking to be the most sports-focus oriented game in the whole series. And on November 11, 2005, this held to be true, as Smackdown vs. Raw 2006 was released to mass critical acclaim and almost universal acceptance from fans of the series. IGN even went on to say that the game is as good as or better than both WWF No Mercy and WWE SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. And who can blame them? The game is one of the best wrestling games of all time. But with that said, it can be improved on. So what have I done? Let's take a look. To start off, the game's roster has gone from a respectable 63 superstars to a whopping 90. This encompasses superstars, divas, and legends, giving a significant boost to any roster and all divisions, ranging from returning fan favorites such as the Hardys and Rhino, to brand new call-ups from OVW such as Eminem, Ken Kennedy, and Bobby Lashley, as well as legends from wrestling history such as Rowdy Roddy Piper, Taz, and Cactus Jack. For the full and complete roster, stay tuned for the roster video later this week. Now, it wouldn't be a definitive edition without attires now, would it? And for this edition, I've gone all out, with the default attire count of 5 increased to over 40. I say over 40 because as I'm recording this, I'm still working on 2 more, which might bump the attire count to 45. So these last 2 might squeeze it in right before release. On the superstar side of things, the attires are compiled from the middle of 2004 all the way into 2005 and some early 2006. As far as the legends go, those that have alternate attires, they're more of a career pack. So for example, you have one Steve Austin attire that represents 1997 to 1999 with 1 leg brace, and then you have another attire with 2 leg braces representing 1999 to 2003. The game's soundtrack has seen an overhaul as well, featuring theme songs from pay-per-views spanning 2004, 2005, and even a little of 2006. And what are new superstars without new moves to accompany them? That's right, there are a whole host of new and removed moves back in for 2006's Definitive Edition. And those moves are not just for the newly added superstars, but some of the pre-existing superstars as well. And of course, accompanying those new superstars are their respective theme songs and Titantrons. Then we get to create a championship, with championships ranging from the Green WWF Championship, to the Smoking Skull Championship, to the United States Spinner Championship, to WCW Championships, NWA Championships, ECW Championships, and a few other hidden ones here and there. For a full list of the titles included, check out the championship video later this week. Lastly, there are a few little extras that I've done that will be shown off on the day of release. Now, I do feel that this is pretty complete, but there will be one update to 2006's Definitive Edition. There are 3 additional superstars that will be added in the future to 2006. 2 of them you already know, which is Maven and Brock Lesnar. But they will not be utilizing old models from previous games. So basically, there will be an update a bit later this year, or maybe early next year for 2006. And that will be its final update. However, there may be a few changes that you might want to keep a hold of this version as well. So yeah, so just giving you the heads up, because when that one is out, this one will be discontinued. So get it while you can. And if you like all that, wait till you see what I got planned for 2007. In all seriousness, I hope you guys enjoy this. I spent the past 8 months planning and putting this together because I was aware that for some people, a new wrestling game can make or break their year. And in 2020, that's probably more true than ever. So I really hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you enjoy the content you've got for the base game, and then, you know, you're kind of getting a DLC pack later too, so it's kind of like a new wrestling game for the year. So I really hope you guys enjoy this and think it's awesome. So what's next? Well, later this month, we will be having a few Patreon extras, just like we did for Smackdown vs. Raw. So looking at a few obscure things from Smackdown vs. Raw 2006 development. Then we will be taking a look at some of the Xbox, WWF, and WWE titles. This has been pretty heavily requested, so not to worry, that's definitely coming, and we'll be doing a big video on Raw 2. I just got started on it now, actually. And then obviously we have Smackdown Shut Your Mouth version 2, a new update to Here Comes the Pain, the release of Smackdown 1 and 2 Definitive Editions, and also the first look at Smackdown vs. Raw 2007. I might be able to slip in a Day of Reckoning 2 update in there as well somewhere. So yeah, loads to look forward to still, but I hope you guys love this Smackdown vs. Raw 2006 because it's really been a labor of love of mine. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell to be notified anytime I upload a brand new video. If you can support me on Patreon, please do at patreon.com/ScottJay. Until next time, guys, take care, wear a mask, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time.